Good afternoon. Can we please have our seats? Welcome to the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. My name is Zainab Usman, and I am the founding director of the Africa program. I'm very much delighted to welcome you today to this very special event that we have on the sidelines of the U.S. Africa Leaders Summit. We have a very, very full house today, and people are, of course, tuning in from all around the world. It is very much heartening to see such enthusiasm and critical engagement with the defining issues shaping the African continent today and into the future. A key objective of our work here at the Carnegie Endowment's Africa program is to engage policymakers and scholars to help shape global discourse and policy on Africa. We facilitate dialogues between African stakeholders and their counterparts in the US, in Europe, in Asia, and other parts of the world to champion the ideas and analysis that will meaningfully promote prosperity and equal opportunity across the continent. Central to this collaboration around shared goals is the pressing global issue of climate change. The Carnegie Africa's program, our climate change work, looks at the intersection of Africa's economic development priorities with global decarbonization policies and innovations. We focus on Africa's efforts to address energy poverty, achieve economic diversification, manage a new scramble for climate minerals, and finance a just transition to a low-carbon future. In the run-up to COP27, which just concluded at Sharm el-Sheikh, we hosted public dialogues on net zero in the Global South and on climate justice for low and middle-income countries. And during our visit to South Africa in September this year, we co-hosted a lively discussion on global lessons to draw from that country's Just Energy Transition Partnership. I encourage you to watch the video recordings of these events and dialogues online. Just last month also, we launched the African Climate Research Organizations database, which compiles a list of Africa-based research organizations working on climate-related technical and policy issues. Today's event, therefore, represents an important milestone, and the insights shared will inform our ongoing work. The African continent aspires to a just energy transition to a low-carbon future. However, African policymakers recognize that mitigation efforts must not come at the expense of the continent's legitimate development aspirations to catalyze socio-economic transformation, to reduce poverty, to increase incomes, and to meet energy needs. Similarly, the United States' global leadership in clean energy technologies reflects a renewed commitment to climate action. What other opportunities and risks are involved in the pursuit of these shared goals? How can African countries leading the way on climate resilience and green growth, such as Namibia, work with the US to advance this energy transition? I am very honored to welcome to the stage Tino Kea, the 10th president of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, to introduce our esteemed keynote speaker from the Republic of Namibia. Tino is a former justice of the Supreme Court of California. He served 2 US presidents at the White House and in federal agencies, and was a faculty member at Stanford University for 2 decades. He's a member of the US Department of State's Foreign Affairs Policy Board. A round of applause for Tino. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Zainab. It is a great honor to be joining you today, Mr. President. It is an honor to have you here at the Carnegie Endowment and visiting dignitaries, U.S. government officials, civil society, press, scholars. Welcome. Our focus at the Carnegie Endowment is on how to use knowledge and relationships to bring the world closer together, foster international cooperation to help the world take on its greatest problems. And those problems are daunting, from nuclear proliferation to climate change, to economic dislocation, the great power of competition. But we also see at the Carnegie Endowment enormous capacity for human innovation and positive change. We also have microphones when we need them. Can you hear me? Terrific. So just to highlight how, despite the challenges the world faces, we also see the capacity for progress. I note that in 1990, 30%, more than 30% of the world was living in abject poverty. Today, that figure is less than 10%. Nowhere is that mix of opportunity and risk, of danger and possibility more evident than in Africa, an extraordinary part of the world that also faces some of the most daunting challenges for climate change, which is our focus today. At Carnegie, our focus on Africa reflects a strong sense that the well-being of more than 1.2 billion people who live and work in Africa is enormously important for humanity, and that what happens in Africa will affect every corner of the planet. The climate emergency is central to that reality that Africa faces. African countries are responsible for only 2.7%, less than 3% of cumulative CO2 emissions over human history, but rank among the most vulnerable, the most daunted by the effects of climate change. This year alone, we have seen disastrous flooding that has killed hundreds in Nigeria and a deadly drought in the Horn of Africa affecting over 20 million people. At the same time, though, the continent has a compelling economic story to tell, one that weaves together innovation, economic opportunity. For example, African startups are attracting record levels of venture capital funding, even as other regions are seeing declines in venture capital funding. The demand for clean energy across Africa offers an opportunity to build on the continent's positive economic story, while also taking seriously the risks of climate calamity and, in fact, climate disaster. And to do so while forging stronger partnerships with countries like the United States. So we see the risks, but we also see the possibility. Helping leaders seize those opportunities, work across the divide between public sector and private sector, developed world, developing world, north and south, east and west, is a major part of our purpose here at the Carnegie Endowment in the decade to come. Our Africa program has become a dynamic hub of activity on climate policy, on technology, on investment, on crucial factors that will drive the future of Africa under the dynamic leadership of Zeynep Ousmane, whom you just heard from a moment ago. There's more to come on that score as we expand to address issues like urbanization in Africa that will affect sustainability throughout the world. And recently, to buoy and further support what we're seeing in our Africa program, we have launched a Carnegie-wide new program on sustainability, climate, and geopolitics to leverage the Carnegie Endowment's full strengths, its entire global footprint across the world, as well as programs that we have in areas like democracy, conflict and governance, nuclear, and technology. The goal in all of this activity is to partner, to listen, to work with countries in Africa, to work with countries around the world, while remaining pragmatic as well as practical. In that spirit of both idealism and pragmatism that the climate emergency demands, it is my great honor to welcome His Excellency, Dr. Hage Geingob, President of the Republic of Namibia. President Geingob is the third president of Namibia. He previously served twice as Prime Minister, was a leader in the country's independence movement, and chaired the Constituent Assembly, which drafted the country's constitution. I also understand he's an avid soccer fan. President Geingob is also interim chair of the Africa Renewable Energy Initiative, aimed at accelerating our efforts around the world to harness the continent's renewable energy potential to serve the needs of Africa. Mr. President, welcome to the Carnegie Endowment.
Oh, you may be seated. Sit down. We learned a lot from Nigeria. Our power in Africa. And I just say, all protocol observed. Because otherwise you have to go and say, Your Excellency, so and so and so and so. and you take 1 hour. So I'll copy from my brothers and say, all protocol observed. I'm very happy to be here to share with you our problems and also maybe talk about our achievements. There are many, and I'm a politician. I deal with politics first. In politics, we want to govern just like you business people do. Your bottom line is that of profit, the pocket. Ours is a bottom line also, but it is a question of peace, unity, and development. We went to the same schools, by the way, also. But some of you think once you're a politician, you don't know too much. But we went to the same schools, but the experience we have is different from what you have in business. So I'm very honored to be here to address the audience such as yours, to talk about Namibia and Africa, and development and climate change. I always say African governance architecture is very important. It should be understood that we have 3 waves of African leadership. First wave of African leaders were those extraordinary personalities, those who told us to get up and fight for our country. I can mention names, but there are too many. Then they were a little bit like demigods. You have to worship them. You have to respect them. Now, second wave of African leaders are those who came during the Cold War confusion, East-West confusion. And we had to be socialists or capitalists, caught up in that confusion, didn't have some of our own policies, trying to copy. And therefore, we had military coups, one-party states. Although one-party states, not all of them are bad, but definitely there are those which, like Tanzania and so on, did a great job. Military coups, yes, we had them. Now, the third wave, African leaders, as I put it, we come through constitutional means. We want to honor term limits. I was in trouble once with my elder brother from Guinea. And Hage, why do you believe in term limits? And I said, well, if you are elected direct by people, some are elected through the parliaments. But in my case, I'm elected direct by the people. I go and campaign and say, Viva Swapo and so on, and then I'm elected. I'm not a member of parliament. I go once there to address them, State of a National address, take few questions and I'm out. So a person who comes like that, to me, there is a need for term limits. If somebody is maybe elected, as some countries are doing now, by parliaments, but that also is causing trouble, as in South Africa, my dear country there, my neighbors, that when you are elected that way, and there's a recall concept, that Thabo Mbeki was recalled, there was only 6 months to go, but since the party controls the parliament, they disagree, they can recall you. We saw that with President Thabo Mbeki. 6 months to go, they were recalled. Then you had also President Zuma. Again, people who were supporting him to recall President Thabo Mbeki went against him. He was recalled. Right now, we're hearing stories like that. So I don't know which is better. Those who are elected direct by people like me, who must serve for 2 5-year terms, if I make it, and then you go. Or those who are elected by parliament, or those who are not elected. So I believe in that system of democratic elections, where there are term limits. And as I said, I have a contract with the sovereigns, the people. And my contract is ending on the 20th of March, 2025. I know it. And then I go. But then the third wave African leaders are also people who are a little bit younger than some of us who come from olden days. And they understand the world much better, I think. They know the technology of the world. They are basically the modern people. And I think the world is becoming digital. It's not for us who are old people. It's for those people who are younger, who must catch up. But then young people also, some are young, but they want to stay for too long also. So it's not only the disease of old people like us. So therefore, the point is that we in Africa, to move on, must learn how to come and how to live, not to be forced out. So in my case, I am definitely sure I will live while they are still missing me. I told them you're going to miss me. So I want that kind of a thing, to go voluntarily and so on. We are talking now about climate change. We are talking about Africa's problems that are different. Climate change is not Africa's problem originally. It's a phenomenon that is there globally. But who is the guilty one? I was misunderstood by BBC. I didn't say the Western countries are criminals. He asked me, he says, are you saying they are criminals? And I agreed, of course, yes. They are the ones who started this. They are the ones who, the emissions, not us. But we suffer from that. So therefore, when we are now talking about climate change, serious problem for the world and for Africa. Why we didn't involve ourselves in that crime, we suffer the most. And then we had conferences after conferences, promises made. $1 trillion, that kind of a thing. Not a cent about Namibia. We talk, we're in Egypt, we're told about now billion or something like that. But we also have a problem as Namibians. We are wrongly considered as higher middle income country. Higher middle income country. Now, they take the World Bank's and IMF's calculation. They take the GDP of the country, divide the smallest population of Namibia, and get the high per capita income, and say you are rich. In a country coming from apartheid division, where blacks were left out, how can you say you are rich by taking that high per capita income? And therefore we said, we are losing out. We don't get soft loans. We don't get grants. And therefore, we must now struggle on our own. We are doing it, but definitely when it comes to even this money we talk about, climate change support, it don't come to us. It first says lower middle income countries. It will be them, if at all they're going to get it. Now what happens to us? You may have a good governance. You are talking about term limits. You are talking we are going to go. But we also have problems. People were left out during apartheid era, who are now, because we thought we must educate them. And we emphasize in education, emphasize on education. Now they're graduating. When they graduate, they have no employment. And some of them have the problem of apartheid, where you must have a boss. Somebody must be there to hire you. So after they get armed with education, they should be looking for somebody to hire them. Instead of creating their own, like in West Africa, people can, market women concept was there, and you also have people to at sell little bit things there and so on, and get income. Our case, they want a boss, somebody to hire, and therefore, get some income from there. And we say, you have education now. They say, oh, this government is failing. They can't even provide jobs to us. And therefore, they may have we're sitting on a time bomb. Because those people can rise up anytime. So please, where we are needing your help, because we are doing our best, but I'm coming to today's topic. What are we asking for transition to be just? Because we want a just transition. What are we asking? We are urging for the scaling up of the levels of climate finance through providing concrete long-term targets for climate finance pathways and accounting methodologies for the collective goal by developed countries to reach US dollars 100 billion a year from 2025 and beyond. Those are promises. Splitting climate finance evenly between adaptation and mitigation. Proceeds from the global carbon market system set up under the Paris Agreement should go to the Adaptation Fund to finance projects and programs in developing countries. Calling on developed countries to provide the means of implementation and support for the effective implementation and enhancement of nationally determined contributions by developing countries. Nationally determined. Don't come and say, I give you this, do this and this and this. That's not a help. So nationally determined, and then supporting of the acceleration of climate technology transfer through creating access to information and knowledge on climate technologies and fostering collaboration among climate technology stakeholders. Africa has the potential to become a key player in the global energy market, and we should seize the opportunity by doing the right things and at the right time. Yes, the time is right to do the right things. Yes, with the right kind of collaborations and partnerships, the time has come to ensure that no one is left behind in our ambition of energy for all. Let us therefore hold hands, pull together, and work together to ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. For all, I'm saying. With that, I would like to end here, but I have experts. But as I said, my governance architecture is different. I said I'm the third wave, or I'm old, third wave president. I believe in teamwork. So when I address people, I talk politics, and I have experts here that I call up during my speech, but during the questions, they will help me. So I have my experts. These guys were sitting. You're also my experts. So I have experts. So with that, I would like to thank you and to say I was just asked to open maybe this because some important people didn't come, like the AU chiefs. So I'm just standing in. I have been used. So I would like to officially open maybe this conference. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. You're definitely not standing in for anybody. Everyone is here to listen to you, as well as the experts, but to you. Of course, you're such a dynamic speaker. You started with a framework explaining where you fit in this waves of leaders we've had and we still have across Africa, but also as a way of really framing the discussion around climate change. And Namibia's asks. I'm very happy you have put those forward, and we definitely have people here from the US government listening, and also people listening online as well. So without further ado, I would like to segue into the next item on our agenda, which is a panel discussion we're going to have. And I would like to call on, to begin with, Her Excellency Dr. Amani Abu Zaid. She's the Commissioner for Infrastructure and Energy at the African Union Commission. Her Excellency is in charge of infrastructure, energy, and digitalization. She has served in leadership positions in international organizations such as the African Development Bank, UNDP, worked with USAID with a focus on infrastructure and energy. I invite you to read her full bio online. Welcome, Your Excellency. Please have a seat there or there. Yeah, thank you. Yes, yes. And then I would also like to call on Mr. Irvin Masinga. He is the U.S. State Department's Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary for the Bureau of African Affairs. Between 2020 and 2021, he served as the Acting Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary in the Bureau of South and Central Asian Affairs. Mr. Masinga also served as Deputy Chief of Mission in Khartoum, Sudan, from 2016 to 2018, and in Conakry, Guinea, from 2013 to 2016. Again, I invite you to read his full bio online. Mr. Masinga, please join us over there. Yes. Before we begin this conversation, I want to quickly walk you through what we're going to do over the next, I think we have about 1 hour or so. We're going to have a discussion with the esteemed guests here for about 30 to 35 minutes. And then we'll open up for questions and answers and remarks for another 20 minutes or so. I think we're going to try to end at around 3:30 p.m. But we also have a reception afterwards on the second floor. So you're very much welcome to join us. So I want to start with Her Excellency Dr. Abu Zaid. We've just heard from His Excellency, the President, Hage Geingob, and he really made the case for just transition for his country, Namibia, but also for the rest of Africa. He made the plea for fulfilling commitments around climate finance, and also the just element that people need jobs. His country has had a very unique experience with apartheid, so there's also that historical legacy. The African Union, I'm aware, has come up with a common position on the energy transition. I think I saw a press release in July this year. Yes, June, July this year, right before COP27. And, you know, a key element that really stood out to me is that it makes it very clear that African countries are going to use the wide array of resources that they have, renewable resources, non-renewable resources, and they want to combine climate and development goals. But I was wondering if you could explain to us, you know, what are the key elements of this Common Africa position on the transition, and what it means specifically for a relationship between the United States and Africa, given that we are really here on the sidelines of the U.S. Africa Leaders Summit.
Okay, thank you very much, Zainab, for these questions. But allow me at the outset to thank Carnegie Endowment for inviting me. That's my first time here, and really delighted to be with you. And Mr. President, by the way, my mandate also ends in March 2025. So we're very much synchronized, my second mandate. So I think we're going to go together. Now, before I delve into the question you asked, let me just maybe share briefly with the audience where we're coming from. First of all, for those who don't know, the African Union is the political organization that unites all of Africa, meaning all the 55 countries of Africa are united under the umbrella of the African Union. And we are also mandated to help build a united, prosperous, peaceful continent, with the well-being of all Africans as being our goals, but also a competitive continent and a major player in international affairs. These are, the goals and the mandate of the African Union, so it has to be understood from the outset. Second, you asked a specific question about energy. Our goal is development. As I said, our mandate is the well-being of Africans. It's true. Energy is the condition sine qua non. There is no development. We have been saying this for years. It took a war in Europe for the world to understand what it means to stay a day without energy. And when you hear the news, when you turn on the television, the CNN, they tell you about the power cuts in Ukraine and the rush, to fix it. And tragic as it is, I look and say, but we do have 6 million Africans, more than half of our continent, who do not have access to electricity until now. So what transition are we talking about? Are we transitioning from coal and firewood and untreated biomass into what? Into nothing. So even the term transition, with all due respect, is not one that has been invented by Africans for Africans. Our goal is universal access to electricity, as His Excellency just said. Universal access to affordable, reliable energy. That is the role of development for Africa. Second, this year, and actually not only this year, since COVID, the other element that was highlighted regarding energy is energy security. Energy security is the top priority of any nation in the world. And we are no exception. We only have 14, 15 countries who are producers of oil and gas. The others are importers. Whether you are exporter, whether you are importer, the markets are very much troubled. The prices are very high, and they can get very low. So energy security is the issue number one, also for us, together with access. And the good news is that energy security actually emphasizes the case for renewable energy, because it's an energy that is or a source of energy that is available in all African countries that vary, whether it's solar for most, geothermal for some, wind, and so on and so forth. Hydro, of course, even Namibia. Also, what people miss is that we have about billion Africans, almost 900 million, almost a billion Africans who do not have access to clean cooking, meaning they are still using coal or charcoal to cook and inhaling the fumes and dying by hundreds of thousands every year. Hundreds of thousands. And I want to stress on that. More than COVID, more than anything else, our people die from these fumes. So access to clean cooking and ensuring that it is, extended to everyone, every household on the continent, is another aspect we want to say, we want to emphasize. So what is the common position? The common position was actually because 2 or 3 years ago, we were confronted with a situation that some countries stated and also exerted pressure on financial institutions to defund projects that use, say, natural gas in Africa, whereas they are using natural gas themselves. And as, Your Excellency, you said there are many experts in the room. Natural gas is definitely the cleanest of fuel and has been now discovered in large quantities across the continent. So what are we saying here? Do not use it for your own people, but to export it. Do not use it, whereas, you have these serious needs, but you just, throw it away. I don't think this is what we want to say. Let me just give you the positive story, like the story of Namibia. Did you know that renewable energy is about 40% of the energy mix in Africa? I guess not. Did you know that we have like more than 20 African countries that rely mainly on renewable energy as a source of energy? I don't think you know that. Do you know that we have 5 or 6 African countries whose energy, more than 90% of their energy come from renewable sources? I don't think you knew that. You only know the bad stories. You only know a stereotype. So we are here, and I liked very much what Tinu said before we met. We are here to change the narrative, and we want you to work with you and to work together into that. We know that climate was not caused by us, but we are the ones who are hardest hit. We want to work together into that. We want to make sure that everyone is enjoying the benefits of development, and we want to do it the right way. And the only way to do it is that we work together, and stop finger pointing, and stop saying you are bad, I am good, or the other way around, and to ensure that this is done, also taking into consideration, the context of each country. There's a country in the south, that has certain potential, or the people suffer from apartheid. There are other countries that are very large, and yes, they show as middle-income country, but full of pockets of serious poverty. There are other countries that are very poor, but they've done very well. Digitalizing, for instance, we mentioned earlier Sierra Leone. So the continent is a continent of hope, and the dynamics on the continent, I dare say, and I've been working in development for more than 30 years, the most dynamic region in the world. I love a quote, and my friend Cecilia here to emphasize that. I love a quote by the president of the African Development Bank, and I know that there are business people in the room. He says, if you're not in Africa, you're not in business. And I'm repeating it. If you are not working with us, you're losing a serious opportunity. You are not in business. Come to Africa, we'll show you the opportunities.
Thank you, Dr. Abu Zaid, for that very passionate and, in a sense, heartfelt, but very factual opening. I want to bring in Mr. Masinga. You've heard from the Commissioner of Infrastructure and Energy of the African Union, and she's made it very clear that the African Union, being an entity representing the African continent, has a key mandate around a number of things, including the development of the continent. And given the situation of Africa, where over 600 million people still lack access to energy, there's still a high concentration of poverty, industrialization is on the agenda, climate goals, climate objectives have to be pursued within the context of achieving development, socio-economic development. I guess my question to you is, what are the areas of shared interests between the United States, its objectives of global leadership on clean energy technologies, and the African priorities that you've heard just listed on achieving economic development, reducing poverty, boosting shared prosperity? What are the areas of shared interests here? And I ask this question because in the past 1 year or so, President Biden's administration has unveiled a number of initiatives, including legislation on one hand that deal with various aspects of climate change, from the infrastructure bill to the Chips and Science Act to the American Competitiveness Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, and then policy documents as well, the new National Security Strategy unveiled in October, as well as, of course, the U.S. strategy towards Africa. All of these have various elements of climate change, energy objectives. So what are the areas of shared interests here?
Two things to start off. One, when I took the generous offer to come today, I didn't quite realize I'd be following two naturally gifted speakers such as President Gangab and the Commissioner on Energy from the African Union. But I'm thrilled to be here. I really appreciate this opportunity. Let me start off with a quote directly from our strategy, which will help to set the stage for the conversation. So, look, we've heard from our African partners that energy transition in Africa must include expanded energy production and access, and must support workers and communities who will bear more short-term costs of the shift to clean energy. Full stop. We understand exactly the context that was discussed here. That in large measure, the issue of climate change is a problem that was not created by Africans, but where Africans suffer the brunt of climate change on a day-to-day basis and don't have the resources that advanced countries have to mitigate or to address that. We understand that very, very well. And that underscores much of our policymaking and advocacy in that space. So as we work together with our African friends and African economies and African businesses to expand energy access in the coming years, we will use this concept as an overarching framework to drive in that direction, to make sure that every African has access to energy, and that every African job that we are intending to foster the creation of will have adequate power to be competitive, so that the African economies will be able to participate in the value chains of tomorrow. The devil is always in the details, but starting where we are today, where, as you indicated, 600 million Africans do not have access to reliable sources of energy. This has to be a policy in which we are encouraging and helping in every way possible. Power Africa, a policy that has been, or a program that has been in existence for a number of years, and where we are expanding our footprint, is absolutely focusing on those transitions and investments in the private sector that will allow greater access to energy for Africans across the continent. Of course, we are going to be looking at areas where clean energy production or cleaner energy production is going to be more prevalent. But there are different elements within that context that where our shared objectives will be seen. The methane pledge, for example, to encourage the end of production of fossil fuel flared production or flared methane, which benefits no one, which contributes to climate change, but does not power African homes nor enable African families to cook their food. The issue that you discussed, the lack of clean cook stoves, is something that has been understood for many years and absolutely contributes to a unhealthy situation for African families and denudes the countryside due to the production of charcoal, contributes to deforestation, the destruction of wildlife, weakens the economic infrastructure and the climate of a country, and does nothing to advance that country. So there are many ways in which we can work together to address the needs of African families. We are in this particular week where the African Leaders Summit is upon us. We are so proud to have President Geingob and his counterparts from across the continent here in Washington to discuss the issues of just energy transition, economic development, peace and security, democracy, and yes, the transition of leadership from the old to the middle to the younger. In that context, we look forward to these kinds of frank, direct conversations about how it is we are going to pursue and achieve the objectives that we all share. We haven't had this conversation, and this is what the African Leaders Summit is, a conversation, since 2014. But the Biden-Harris administration has made a commitment that we're fulfilling today, first to have these conversations. And absolutely, economic growth and how to power economic growth has to be at the top of that conversation and will be. We look forward to well, I invite all of you to look forward to the outcomes of these conversations and pledges that we will have as the week rolls forward. And it really, as important as this week is and will be, it is the start of a new phase in our relationship where that conversation about how to achieve these types of goals, particularly in the energy space, will be ones in which our partnership between peers is the foundation upon which we move forward. So watch this space. Mr. President, watch this space.
I'm going to come back to you on a couple of things, but now I want to ask Dr. Abu Zaid. You've heard from Mr. Masinga a number of the initiatives underway, but also the promise of more to come. Even perhaps within this week, there might be new initiatives and announcements, and we'll try to push him a bit to see if he can give us a preview of some of these initiatives. But before then, I was wondering if you had any response to that. And specifically, my question to you is, what are things that the U.S. should do more of in this space? And what are the things that maybe can be kind of set aside for now? And perhaps, what would you like to see concretely by Friday when the summit ends? So more broadly, in the space, what should be done? What should the U.S. do more of? And then specifically for the summit by Friday, what would you like to see as an outcome within the space of climate and energy?
Actually, what I would like to see is not by Friday. I wanted to see that, many years before, not by Friday, but there is time to catch up. I think the world, I mean, especially this year, the world, there's some kind of serious change. And by the way, and when I say change, I don't mean negatively. I love change. Change is the source of innovation. Change is what makes you do things differently and not settle in the comfort zone. So I'm very happy with what has been going on, despite the crises, the 3 or 4 crises we've been going through since 2020. It has seen the whole of Africa in 2 weeks, let alone the world, has been online. Has been seen, tremendous development in e-health everywhere in our continent since, the vaccines. And this year, the emphasis on energy is what I think is going to help move matters much faster and spur innovation in not only in the existing technologies, but in so many new technologies that are coming. So I'm very happy with that. Now, if we, and I know we are, all of us, I'm not saying us and you and US and Africa, we are smart. We should really seize the opportunity and make it work for all of us. Investments, and I believe in investments, Mr. President. I know I can wait forever for the money, that has been promised. And I've been waiting for them for a long time. I'm not going to go into that. That's why I leave that for the politicians to talk about. Hello. And there's another finance guy who's sitting here. We have projects. We have plans and projects that we are willing, to share with investors, to work together. And that's what I want to see happening. I want us together to change the narrative and this, barriers, psychological or other, or culture or whatever, that seems to have been either existed or been building up over years where there has been some kind of disconnect with the continent. We have to end with that and come closer and make them work, not only for the prosperity of Africa, which is, of course, our goal, but also the prosperity of America. And all studies show that profits are highest when you work in the continent, in Africa. So I'm looking for a win-win situation based on actual projects, not promises of something to come. We can make it happen as we stand right away, provided there is goodwill, and I know there is good intentions, that we break with the stereotypes of risk and whatever, I know they may be here or probably online, the credit rating, agencies, which, rate our countries in a distorted manner that is not, how they rate also other countries in other parts of the world. So we have to break with that and really get into work. I am a person of action, and I've always been. I'm an engineer, among so many other things, so I believe in things when they happen, when they work, and speeches don't go anywhere. You want to work, you want to make it work for your country, you want to make it work, and we want to make it for Africa. Let us just go forward and start on the projects right away, right now, before Friday even.
Excellent.
I'm really excited about what the prospect that you discuss. So for the Africa Leaders Summit, which is starting tomorrow, officially starting tomorrow, going through Thursday, the middle day, Wednesday, is the Africa Business Forum. All day, it's just about business, just about making deals, okay? So like a former president said, Calvin Coolidge, the business of America is business. The middle of our summit is going to be just about that, bringing together CEOs and business leaders from Africa and the United States, together with policymakers and others, leaders from civil society, to talk exactly about what needs to happen to create those enabling conditions in various regions and countries in Africa to unlock the investments needed to drive forward jobs and the economy of tomorrow. So there will be announcements of deals. There'll be discussions of what needs to happen for the next set of deals, the next set of investments, but we're excited about that. And some of those will be in energy, right? So in recent months and years, we've seen expansion of energy production, including traditional fossil fuels that have helped to moderate some of the price fluctuations we've seen around the world coming from Africa. Just as Africa is also moving quickly in the direction of a cleaner energy future. So this is something that's going to happen simultaneously. We recognize the disruptions that have been particularly caused in the past year with the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the energy fluctuations within. But the long-term direction, both in our country, around the world, and in Africa, is towards cleaner energies.
Yes.
And we are very excited to be part of that future. Our policies, our projects, or excuse me, our programs can only help to foster and to encourage. Again, at the end of the day, it is going to be the U.S. and the international private sector that's going to combine with the African private sector to really create those changes that are going to be necessary to bring power to African citizens everywhere.
Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I want to, maybe for those who don't know, I mean, we have 8 countries in the continent as we speak who already started or about to start the production of green hydrogen. We have 4 countries who have taken steps to produce the SAF, the Sustainable Aviation Fuel. That we, under the African Union, we have a program for clean fuel for cars, which is, energy for transport account for more than almost 25-30% of the uses of fossil that we have on the continent. We have a whole region, Eastern Africa, that relies on geothermal energy for its energy source. And actually the projects that we are having in geothermal energy in Eastern Africa with the African Union is all done by private sector. So the license, we finance this program. So there is this dynamic, this energy of energy that is happening. Very excited. I mean, I'm very excited about it in the continent. And you said that the business of Africa, of America is business, but we also would like it to be business for business, not business with ties, business with conditions, business if you do this, you do that. We want it to be business. And if we do business and we leave business people, talk to business people, believe me, things are going to grow very, very quickly. Just let business, talk to business, and everyone will reap the benefits, I'm sure.
On that excellent note, I think I want to open for questions, comments, remarks from our audience. So we have about 20-25 minutes for that. But before we open in general, I want to call on a few people. To begin with, I want to call on Sanjeev Gupta, board member and executive director of the Africa Finance Corporation. I think he has some comments and remarks to give.
Oh, good Lord, I wasn't expecting this. Okay. This is neither just nor a transition.
Oh, goodness.
Now, so since you have given me the opportunity and without meaning to, steal anybody's thunder, essentially I work for a corporation called Africa Finance Corporation, and we are one of the largest infrastructure financing companies in Africa. And thanks for the comments you made, because Her Excellency and I have shared many stages together, and we probably share the same sentiments. And the sentiments are pretty straightforward, and that is that for us on the continent, we suffer from the impact of climate change more directly than most of us here in this room probably appreciate. Right? So climate change is not a theoretical discussion for us. It's a real discussion, because it affects everybody's daily lives, literally, okay? And therefore, as institutions on the continent, we're doing what we can to finance responsible way of developing energy. No questions about that, right? As a matter of fact, AFC itself is an organization which currently owns the largest amount of renewable assets on the continent, right? So to me, this is not even a debate worth having whether we should go the climate route and whether we should be responsible. The point, however, is that sometimes the inconsistency and sometimes the incoherence, if you want to call it that, of global approach to common problems not only mystify us, they frustrate us. Right? And why I'm using those words is because till very recently, gas was a four-letter word. And gas can never be a four-letter word because GAS, right? And we looked at it with incredulity, with surprise, with shock, with amazement, because here we are on the continent where 80% of our people don't have electricity. We have a development agenda to fulfill. We have fiscal deficits to manage. We are being told coal can't be touched, oil should be dismissed, and gas should be left in the air. And it just doesn't make sense. And given the current geopolitics, the current issues with energy security, suddenly gas is back in favor. Now, in many ways, I can applaud it. In many ways, I can cheer it. And in many ways, I can feel relieved. But in many ways, I'm scared. I'm scared because very often we are caught between a rock and a hard place. And there's an ancient African proverb which says that when elephants fight, the grass suffers. And it's the grass that should not suffer, because the grass is home to 2 billion people, most of whom are below the age of 20, who need jobs, who need employment, and we need industrialization. So this is not meant to be a political commentary. The point I'm trying to make is very straightforward, that there is no energy mix in the world 50 years down the line which is talking of gross zero. It's talking of net zero, which means there is gas in the mix, there's coal in the mix, there's oil in the mix. Why is the African continent suddenly being told that you must forget all that and go to net zero? We are already on net zero, for God's sake. We can teach you how to remain on net zero. Stop all your lights, live without electricity, and you will go to net zero. We know a thing or two about going to net zero. And that's why we are saying to the community at large, to the financiers in this room, and to the leaders of this world, that do not look at one objective and dismiss the bigger objective, which is the SDG goals, which is 17 of them, not just one of them. Okay? And that's the perspective, or that's the context in which we would love the interactions and the conversations to flow, because at the end of the day, we need to have an energy mix. We cannot dismiss a few things at the altar of just a very selfish or a very narrow objective. That's all I had to say. Sorry, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I now want to call on, I hope he's not going to describe this as unjust, Mr. Mark Karato from Power Africa. Is the
Well, Mr. Gupta said he didn't have anything to say, then he came up here and gave an excellent speech. So I'm going to make this really, really quick, because I do want to hear the audience as well. And I already had a great colleague from the U.S. government in Nerve here tell us a bit of the context. As you know, Power Africa is coming up on 10 years old. So we're absolutely thrilled to be here. And Mr. President, it's an honor to see you and Mr. Minister, who I spoke with at the UN General Assembly, others. Power Africa is exactly what everyone says is we're trying to get done here, which is facilitate. We don't own the projects. It's your vision, it's your ideas, it's your motivation that we want to help work across the spectrum. So Power Africa works from enabling environment all the way through the deal, with the idea that the private sector always needs to be at the core of the resources, because we certainly can't write the check. No one else can certainly write a check. The investment is far too big, and the problems are far too complex to work it outside of partnership. So that's what Power Africa is. It's a partnership. It has been since day one. Over 200 partners, 12 U.S. government agencies form the core. But it's a U.S. government-led partnership that transcends 20 development partners, other bilateral partners like the Brits and the Canadians and the Japanese, the World Bank, the African Development Bank, and then over 170 companies who have signed a letter of commitment with specificity as to what they want to get done toward those top-line goals of 30,000 megawatts and 60 million connections. And we're about halfway there, and about halfway there on time. So we hope to plug along. We hope to far exceed those goals. But, you know, I guess in terms of the Leadership Summit and looking at what this is about, and the idea that the second day, the entirety of the day is the Africa Business Forum, because we see that kernel and how we have to build this out. Things like we're calling the Clean Tech Energy Network, where we have resources and ideas and expertise and investment. And sometimes we even have them in really well-packaged nodes, like Silicon Valley, or like Research Triangle in North Carolina, where we can go and see where technologies happen. And then we go to somewhere like Kenya, where they have the same thing in the Silicon Savannah, and Nigeria, and Namibia, where entrepreneurs are also building ideas. And those can go both ways. They need to go both ways, right? Those partnerships contextualized for the African context, and vice versa, bringing some of those technologies to the U.S. is a mutual win-win. And I think that mutual win-win is what Power Africa was created to facilitate, to bolster. We're very excited to do so. We'll have some announcements over this week. We're really bullish. We mentioned before some of the tough statistics we all know, the 600 million. There's also 100,000 health clinics who don't have power. Can you imagine rolling into a health clinic at night and not having lights, let alone the right kind of equipment to make sure that you or your child's needs are taken care of? So we're really focused on this along with others under the SDGs, making sure that with the development goals, we look across the spectrum, we see what's possible, and then we don't stop until we get there. And so with that, I'll stop, but happy to answer more questions. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And finally, I would like to call on Amadou Hott. I don't know if he's here.
Who's here?
The special envoy of the President of the African Development Bank on the Alliance for Green Infrastructure in Africa. He's also the immediate past Minister of Economy, Planning and Cooperation of Senegal, and a former Vice President for Power, Energy, Climate Change and Green Growth at the African Development Bank.
Thank you very much. A great pleasure to be here today, actually, Mr. President. We are saluting you. I just started this role, actually, with the bank to help mobilize project development capital first, about $500 million, to prepare projects, green infrastructure projects, and renewable energy, of course, will be at the heart of this initiative. And then also grow the alliance so that we can have more parties to finance the pipeline of green infrastructure projects. My personal view on this issue of just energy transition, what I've been always saying to countries when I'm asked what are my views, for me, if you're a country that does not have fossil fuel production and you have renewable energy, let's say, opportunities like Namibia, you would do what Namibia is doing, is pushing for more solar, for green hydrogen, etc., right? But if you are a country that produces oil and gas. In my personal opinion, if you have at the same time opportunities for clean energy, renewable energy, maximize first your renewable energy options first, and export your oil and gas so long as you can find a buyer. Because maybe in 20 years' time, you will not see a buyer, or 30 years' time. So you use that money instead of consuming your fossil fuel in your home country, sell the oil and gas, take the money, invest in diversifying your economy, because maybe after 20, 25 years, there will be no buyer for your oil and gas, or will be less buyers. Many countries have set up sovereign wealth funds in case they run out of oil or gas one day. For me, it's running out of buyers of oil and gas one day. That's why you're setting up a sovereign wealth fund. So the key is sell oil and gas like Egypt is doing. Egypt will be dismantling gas plant, 10 gigawatt, so that they can use that fuel to sell it to buyers today and use that money to invest in education, health, and in their economy. And at the same time, they're harnessing the power of the sun and the power of the wind to replace that 10 gigawatt with very clean energy. And the whole world will finance it. And in the next few years, it will be very difficult to find really money to invest in oil and gas. So it is in our interest, really, I think. It's an economic sense to push more towards renewable energy, towards more green infrastructure. It's not just because I've become a special envoy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think Mr. Masinga wants to respond to that. Go ahead.
I like numbers quite a bit, and when we look at our own country here in the United States and the changing energy mix over the past 10, even 5 years, it is the numbers that are driving the direction towards clean and renewable energy, simply because installing solar and wind is a cheaper alternative than even the most efficient gas. Now, those numbers may be a little bit different in the United States than they may be in an African context for a lot of different reasons, but they're not so off. And the trend lines are what they are. So the issue of ensuring that Africans get the energy that they need to drive their economies forward, this has been an issue on the table. This isn't just the past 5 years. This has been on the table for many years. And so even as there has been progress, that progress has been frustratingly slow. So as the numbers indicate that there is probably greater gains to be made through the pursuit of renewable energy, naturally speaking, economies will go in that direction, just as they are here in the United States.
Okay, I think we want to open up now. Do you want to say something?
No, but we need to have women speakers as well.
So we're going to take 3 questions at a go. If you could introduce yourself, your name and the organization you're with, and then please make it very quick so that we can take as many questions as possible. Okay.
A lady over there.
We have, okay, we'll start with the lady and then the gentleman here, and then the gentleman over there.
Hello, hi everyone. My name is Lara Abiana. I am an associate at BSR, Business for Social Responsibility. Thank you so much for this wonderful panel. There were many great points about the problematic and often westernized framing of the just transition debate, so definitely appreciated that. I want to look specifically at the human rights side of the just transition and to get your thoughts on and to apply an African lens to that. Specifically, there's a lot of a conversation and a lot of news around indigenous rights when mining for materials related to clean energy in North America, South America, Oceania, and Africa. It often involves infringing on the rights of people that originate from that land. And so I wanted to hear if there are any points on that intersection between clean energy and human rights, specifically indigenous rights, labor rights, land ownership, et cetera. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Gentleman over there.
Thanks. Yeah, Richard Morgan from Anglo-American big mining company. So it feeds into your question, also to the one over there, really. We've got big investments in Africa. And I suppose what I want to introduce is the question also of demand for the critical raw materials that go into the just transition, which is your point. So how can you do responsible mining, because this is a great opportunity for Africa. We, big producers of platinum group metals, go with hydrogen. It's a good mix for fuel cells. We produce copper, but largely out of Latin America, not yet out of Africa. So it's, again, how can we
What's the name of your firm?
Anglo-American.
Yeah, of course.
No, so we've got a big presence in South Africa, Southern Africa, but we're looking at Zambia, we're looking at Angola, we're looking at DRC, but these sometimes are difficult countries to operate in, so that's really where we'd hope to get the most out of Wednesday, I suppose, is how do we create the platforms where you can have just mining, and that gives the opportunity for wider development. So the SDG is very much part of that discussion, so welcome all thoughts on that platform. Thank you.
Okay, can we get a third question from, or comment from?
Thank you. My name is Obeth Kanjose. I am the Director General of the National Planning Commission Namibia. So I serve directly under His Excellency the President. And I'm also the Green Hydrogen Council Chairperson, a council consisting of about 8 ministries, most of them of the economy. And our task is simple: develop a strategy, green hydrogen, solicit investment from the world into green hydrogen, make available the land and the projects necessary to drive the green hydrogen strategy, and scout the world for partnership amongst other governments to help the Namibian government deliver on the green hydrogen. This is a process that started about 2 years ago, including today. His Excellency the President is very clear about how that governance structure is to run. It's separate from ministers and the technocrats that do all the work. And that led into one of our major projects with a company called Hydrogen-Energy. It's about 11 billion US. Will deliver about 280,000 jobs in the next 10 years. It's actually pushed the government to consider some of its off-limits territories where the capacity factors, both wind, sun, common user infrastructure, port facilities, is actually included. We foresee signature of this major project in the first quarter of 2023. We are huddled in the negotiation rooms right now. Just imagine anywhere else to go. We've been here before. We are back here today. We've solicited major MOUs and agreements with European governments. We're a case study country. We are rolling one of the large backbone infrastructure to support the distribution of energy. We are signatories to the Free Trade Continental Area of Africa. So we are ready to actually get that energy to each and every one of the 600 million Africans. So here's a country, small as it were, but large, very large energy portfolio in the future. The sun, the wind, the water, the complete infrastructure, the sub-economies, the development, infusion of housing, jobs, every bit of the windmills, the solar panels, the digging, just about new infrastructure is coming up. So I entice all of you in the room. The US dollars are waiting for Africa so that Africa actually lead every one of those of us, 600 million of us. The demographic dividend is sweeping by. This is the time for investors to put that dollar such that every one of that demographic dividend youth composition, 60% of us in Africa can get a living, a job. We can have everyone included for the prosperity that he is actually cultivating today. Thank you.
And then there's a lady over there.
let's respond, and then we'll do another round. Do you wanna
Respond.
Is there any
So,
to the
sure.
human rights?
Definitely. One theme that has come out in the question over there, as well as the discussion we've seen heretofore, has been the issue of equity.
Yes.
And I just wanted to touch on equity in a couple of different ways. One related to mining. So you can see in a number of different African countries, Democratic Republic of Congo, absolutely at the top of that list, where you see a very stark difference between standards, environmental and human rights standards that are seen in various types of companies versus other less scrupulous companies. And when we're talking about the question of equity, we cannot help but think about that very important question that impacts so many people's lives and the environment in so many African countries. So we very much would like to encourage partnership with companies that mine these materials that are critical for the future of the green economy in a responsible manner. The impact of climate change. Unfortunately, the impact of climate change is upon us. We see it here. It's not snowing. The impact on African populations is, as we indicated, as we discussed earlier, acute and growing more acute as the years go by. Looking at the map of the projections of how climate change will affect global rainfall and global agriculture, there are certain belts in Africa which are going to be more acutely impacted than anywhere else. And unfortunately, those areas currently depend on rain-fed agriculture that is generally low yield. The United States is partnering with our academic community, the very academic community that helped to drive the first two green revolutions, to address this issue so that African farmers and African economies are capable to address or to respond to this issue. And deforestation. This is an issue that absolutely impacts Africa and impacts those people that depend on forests. So we would like to continue to work intensively to partner with the non-governmental organizations, civil society, both in Africa and around the world, to determine how best to address that very important issue.
Do you have anything to add?
Yes. The very first thing about human rights is that for people to live well. This is the human right, and that's what we want for our people. So when someone comes and digs and gets out a mineral for whatever purpose, destroying people's lives, destroying the environment, destroying the forest or the desert, or even overfishing where people, with the sea, we are talking about serious issues that go beyond environmental, that touch directly human lives. And here I'm going to put my older hat of the one I used to be right before this job as in charge of natural resources and natural resources management across the continent. The problem of mining is a huge one and did not start with renewable energy. It started from way before. But I think I'm really happy that you raised this issue, because we also have to pay attention and be mindful of what is the price of renewable energy, because it does not come cheap. People look at the batteries for a car. I mean, they look at a car, electric cars, they see no emissions. But what went into that battery for the battery to reach us as it is, there's a long story behind it. It's not always a very good one. I think I believe in my intervention, I said these are the times where I am expecting that there's a race, when it comes to innovation. And I hope that with innovation, we see also other solutions regarding resources, these minerals that are critical for renewables, because the last thing we want is that we solve one problem and create a new one. I mean, I as you probably know, that there are firms that already digging in the ocean for cobalt. They go unseen. They go and dig the ocean. They are right now, as we speak, they are destroying the ocean, trying to get that cobalt. So we want to be careful about that, and this is where innovations come. And this is where I'm excited about green hydrogen, for instance, because we started with ships. There are now ships fueled by green hydrogen from Egypt, you know, that are running the oceans. It's still, the technology is not yet there for cars because it's not this efficient, but we'll get there. And I'm confident that we're going to get there very soon. But that said, in the meantime, it's not about getting that mineral. You want to see what happens in the ecosystem about it, around it. You want to see what happens to people and how people are not just compensated in money, but compensated in a way, alternative way of living. And more importantly, because I said the well-being of people, why are we just taking this mineral away and shipping it outside? Why there isn't, you know, within the same place, you know, value addition, transformation of this mineral on the continent for people to work and get another means of life? Why is it always that this continent destiny is that everyone, you know, comes and just digs and then takes the things out and leave us where we are? And then with nothing, the price that we are giving is nothing compared to the value addition that could be created. And this is the story of all natural resources, not just about renewable energy. Take chocolate. I mean, the cocoa of Africa, 80% of the cocoa worldwide comes from Africa. How many Africans, you know, compare the price of cocoa and the price of a chocolate bar? You'll see the difference and how much we are underpaid. So if we really are talking human rights, then make the industry happen in the continent so as to make us so that we benefit as well as others. And mind you, that battery will cost you 30, 40% less when you produce it in Africa. So make the technology transfer, produce in Africa, make that industry and transformation happen in the continent, and there we will be talking human rights.
On that issue of production of value chains or creation of value chains in that industry on the continent, watch this space.
Yeah.
Watch this week.
Okay. So is there going to be an announcement?
We heard you loud and clear.
Can we get a preview?
We're watching.
We're going to take one more round, but very quickly, I want to jump in here because I think this is such a crucial topic, and especially the remarks made by the gentleman from Anglo-American. The continent has had a very terrible history with mining and extractive industries along exactly the same lines you've mentioned, Dr. Abu Zaid, that there are pathologies of mineral extraction without value addition. There are communities whose human rights have been deprived. Jobs are not created. So people are rightly suspicious. And it looks like now we're going to have potentially a new scramble for minerals. It's already starting to happen. But beyond that, those risks, there are also opportunities to do things differently. Because we know how doing things the wrong way, what results from that. We can do things differently. African countries can do things differently. The U.S. wants to diversify its supply chains around critical minerals and wants to build clean energy industries. There's a kind of global competition underway. We don't have to go too much into the politics. But African countries can join U.S. supply chains, these new supply chains that are going to be built, but at a higher level, not just as
or U.S. also can join Africa. So Anglo-American, next time I see you, you're not going to talk about mining. Show me your factory, producing those batteries in Africa. Then we will be talking. Then we're taking care of ESG. Then we will be talking.
We have a hydrogen truck.
Fantastic. So that's what I want to hear.
So there are opportunities, and I want to see more discussions around that. Certainly for us at the Carnegie Africa program, we're devoting a bulk of our research and analysis to that, to finding and identifying opportunities, and then bringing together stakeholders, investors, the government, civil society, other partners, on this area to tap those opportunities. So we have to conclude now, but I just want to go do another round of questions. We're not going to address all of them, but I just want to give you the opportunity to speak. Make it very, very, very quick, please. That gentleman over there.
And the lady over here.
Okay.
Make it very quick.
My name is Tanyi, and I work for the U.S. federal government. I have a quick question. Let's see, for the Deputy Secretary of State. You talk about the future of Africa, the long term is clean energy, yes. So I want to understand, can the U.S. government transfer technology, like the clean energy technology, to Africa? Take, for instance, a country like Ukraine, they use a lot of nuclear energy. When I look at a country like Nigeria, 200 million people, they don't have access to power. Can maybe the U.S. government commit to transferring some clean nuclear technology to Nigeria to help develop the power sector? Then also...
sorry, one question. We have to, because we're running out of time. Thank you very much. The gentleman and then the lady.
Hello, thank you. Congratulations and thank you very much for your presentations. My name is Julio Cesar Guiti. I represent SUDEC Inc. As we speak, many financial instruments are being created. During COP27, we heard about the Climate Adaptation Fund. How do you anticipate the allocation of resources to be done? In the form of credit lines, policies, investment loans? There are a lot of intermediaries in the process taking a cut. If you can please share your thoughts about it. Thank you.
Okay. The lady there. Very quick. Make it quick.
Hello, Winnie Okello with Africa Engineering News. Literally was around that topic, but I will expound upon it in terms of how can we concretely then begin to see policies and practices that align with the E word that we don't often hear, ethics and morality, in how we invest in Africa, which you have touched upon it several times. So how can we practically see that happening?
Can we give the gentleman over there?
My name is Kobe Kumsen, and thank you, Excellency, for being here and for the subject on governance in Africa. My question is to Dr. Abu Zaid from the African Union. How are we going to pay to power, to provide electricity for the 600 million Africans who don't have electricity? The world is going through a period of possibly recession, inflation, so there's not going to be enough money from foreign countries, from the developed countries coming into Africa. How is the African Union going to develop a policy to create funding so that this funding can be used to provide electricity for the 1.4 billion people on the continent?
Okay.
Thank you.
This lady here, and then that gentleman, and then we have to close. Sorry.
Dr. Myrtle Alexander, Institute for Academic Management. Just to piggyback on the question of financing for Africa, based on the conference we had this morning, China invests 71 billion, the US invests 23 billion. How do we increase that 23 billion to around 250 billion? Question?
And then the gentleman over there.
Thank you. I'm Dr. George Alula. I'm an engineer and also a businessman. I'm going in line. I just came late, but the point you made, there is an experience that came from the automotive industry, from Asian company, coming to the US. You have 60% of the car in the road here coming from Asian company. So all the mining company, the oil industry, Africa have everything that you just go there, not to take and go away, establish yourself. This is 2 billion people market. It will be easy for you. We need to stop talking about help, those assistance. We have the natural resource that when we put a banking or storage for gold, the value increases every single day. Oil, the same thing. So I'm going in line with what Ma'am said. I don't know how to address you because I came late, but with all my respect, with all my respect, I'm just asking all those people who are African, whatever be their color of their skin, just change your mind, industrialize all the continent, and you will be making more money because you have 2 billion people and the remaining of the world as a market. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for all those questions. If you could give just closing remarks and address anything, any aspect of those questions. I know there are a lot.
I'll try and go fast.
Yeah.
On the nuclear question, nuclear technology has been around for many years. It's not a question of transferring it. It's just whether or not it was appropriate for not just Nigeria, but a whole range of countries. And so, I mean, we can talk about that later if you'd like. The financing mechanism for that was agreed to or discussed, I think that's a better way of putting it, at COP27. It has taken many years and many COPs to get to the point of discussing how to move forward with a finance. So the questions posed were very specific, and I don't think we're in a position, I think we're in a position now to have further conversations. I think that was the outcome of COP27. So it's frustratingly slow. But this is the reality that we have to work within in the global context. The ethics and morality question, how to inject ethics and morality into the policy-making space, I would recommend that you continue to talk to your elected representatives. They talk to me all the time about their values and how their values should be reflected in our policies. How to pay for power, how to pay for the 600 million Africans that don't have access to electricity. I think the real answer there is purchasing power, right? When Africans have, across the board, have greater purchasing power, they will buy their own electricity, just like everywhere, people around the country, people around the world. Fair, but I mean it's a phased approach. So the more electricity that comes online, the greater the value chains grow, the more purchasing power is there, et cetera. I mean, this is not something that is going to be turned on overnight, not to use a mixed metaphor. But the solution is not the world giving aid to Africa for electricity. It's for African economies to be strong enough for Africans themselves to pay for power. How to turn that 250 or the 40 billion assistance, I think that was the question asked, to 250 billion. I think A, had a conversation with elected representatives. They're the ones who will make those decisions. But our policy for many years, at the end of the day, has been that there is no way to provide enough aid to bring all Africans out of poverty, right? African economic growth is the mechanism for that. And I personally subscribe to that objective. And then manufacturing in Africa. How to bring manufacturing of batteries, of just all value chains to Africa. It is a phenomenal idea, and I agree with all of you who say that the opportunities are there. There needs to be some enabling investments to allow for that. I'm sure the president from Namibia can speak to that to a far greater degree than I can. But that's a conversation that we are definitely going to have this week at the African Leaders Summit, and that will be a topic of conversation over the coming years. But the opportunities, I agree, are absolutely there.
Dr. Abu Zaid?
I think I can second many of the things you just said, but maybe again on the issue of finance, we're not here, and I don't think any one of my of the lead African leaders here present or my colleagues are here to discuss aid. None of us is here to discuss aid. We know that. We know that. I said we are here to discuss investments. We are here to discuss development. And by the way, I mean, I covered the areas in my work: infrastructure, energy, and digitalization. And these sectors are the most capital intensive sectors when it comes to development. They are the most expensive ones. I'm talking about billions, hundreds of billions that are needed. We are talking, and Mr. Amadou Hod is here. When you look at the pension funds and the funds that investment funds around the world, I mean, trillions and trillions of dollars are going around. We said if we can capture 2 or 3% of these trillions, we will cover the infrastructure gap in Africa. So we're talking investment. And by the way, The same thing we are saying here, we are saying also to our private sector in the continent. As a matter of fact, we created an entity to provide, to entice and to mobilize African support, African private sector support in African projects called Africa 50. I hope they are here or they will be coming to the summit. So it's, and why you should do it into period of recession? Where else will you get benefit and profit like the one that you did in Africa? It's the highest in the world. So if you are smart, whether you are an individual or country, this is the place to put your money. And that's my, don't tell anybody, but I gave you this tip. This is when I just gave you a tip.
Agreed.
On that note, I think we have to close. We could stay the whole day discussing this very important issue for Africa, but also for the U.S. and the rest of the countries around the world. But I really want to thank everyone for joining us here today. We really obviously had a very full house. Very importantly, I want to thank His Excellency President Hage Geingob for gracing us with his presence, for speaking very clearly, very concisely about where the opportunities are for Africa, what the asks are for his own country, and indeed for the rest of the continent. Also to the Namibian delegation that we have here with us today, thank you very much for joining us. To our esteemed panelists, Mr. Masinga, Dr. Abu Zaid, thank you very much for your clear insights. And of course, to our audience for joining us. All of these excellent questions, excellent remarks, I think are very, very insightful. And importantly, to the team at the Carnegie Endowment for pulling this excellent event, the Africa program, the entire team, thank you very much. We have a reception upstairs on the second floor with some drinks and finger food. Please feel free to join us and mingle and get to meet one another. I wish you an excellent summit for the rest of the week. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Dr. Isaac.
That was interesting, exciting.
Yes, I look forward to